Welcome to the realm of heroes and monsters. Story time with your host, AP Fuchs. Stories of intrigue, stories of horror, stories of superheroics, stories of monsters. Get ready, the thrill ride begins.
Welcome to a new episode of the Realm of Heroes and Monsters Storytime with your host, me, AP Fuchs. I'm a writer, I'm an illustrator, I'm a cartoonist, and I'm just a plain old geek who loves collectibles and loves telling stories and loves making comics and loves making fun videos for people. And that's where I'm coming from with all this stuff, you've been listening to up until this episode, and of course for the subsequent episodes to come. We're just coming here to have fun, share stories, and just let our imaginations go. And that's the point of the season 2 of this podcast is, last season we did the flash fiction, which was great, but they were short stories, right? So now we have some longer pieces, and the goal here is just, I would very much like you to just, sit back on your favorite couch or lie down on the bed or wherever you do to get yourself comfortable, and then just close your eyes, rest your head, and just take the next few minutes and listen to a story about a priest gone mad. Booth 2. Intensity. That's what it was. Every afternoon they came in between 1 and 3. Every day exactly 1 hour after mid-morning mass. Today, it wasn't supposed to be any different. It was assured Father Haldome, Mr. Thompson, would come into St. Mary's Cathedral for confession that afternoon. Come to Booth 2, his confessional. The confessional door creaked open, the number 2 swinging loosely on the nail that held it in place on the door, and Mr. Thompson, Gerard was his first name, came in and kneeled behind the black mesh, crossed himself, and began his confession the same way he had every week for the past 20 years. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 1 week since my last confession, Gerard said in a flat tone, the one that stated things never changed for him. As usual, Father Haldo leaned on the armrest of his chair and ran a palm over the bald spot atop his head. He wiped a thin film of sweat on his black robe. Sweat still ran down his dark sideburns, trailing along his jaw. He hated the stuffiness of Booth 2, hated the scent of the wood and the smell of his own sweat mixing with the warm air. Gerard began going on again about his wife and how he thought she was sleeping with their neighbor, quote-unquote, Mr. Smith. Gerard called his neighbor that, but Father Haldane always thought the name sounded too made up to be the truth. He didn't appreciate lying while confessing. It defeated the purpose. So, thinking his wife was having an affair, not her first one, mind you, Gerard added, Gerard started venturing off on his own at night, searching for any woman who might give him company. He wasn't a bad-looking man. He was in his mid-50s, his dark hair already heavily streaked with gray. He had this jaw that looked as hard as an anvil, and a weathered yet kind expression was always in his soft gaze. He was slim and seemed to be in good shape from his many years as a construction worker. Father Haldo was in good shape too. Lately, he'd been taking up jogging in the mornings and doing push-ups before bed. He found the exercise helped him deal with the monotony of sitting day in and day out in a small booth, listening to people go on and on about their secret sins and how he was somehow expected to forgive them when, in truth, it was not his place to forgive them, contrary to popular Catholic belief. And giving sermons was no wonderland either, saying the same thing each day for an hour in the mornings, an hour in the afternoons, an hour in the evenings. It weighed on him, turned his mind to jelly. Father Haldo supposed he first noticed the change 4 years earlier when he listened to Mrs. Snyder explain her sick habit of touching her 6 cats between their legs at least 4 times a week. It was then, he later realized, he discovered that a life of serving hadn't been the correct choice. But he stuck it out anyway, seeking counsel with the other priests in the church, especially those late-night talks with Father Reynolds in the rectory. Before Gerard even got into the thick of it, Father Haldo had... What? What was it I done? What have I done? He ran his fingers along the black wire mesh and felt moisture on his fingertips. There, in the bottom right corner, was a hole, a weakness in the wooden frame holding the mesh in place. Gerard had been speaking about something, but Father Haldon knew about the hole, and the next thing he realized, he was reaching into it. Gerard not paying attention, too lost in his confession about his night out with Daisy. Or was it Trixie? What was her name again? Father Haldo had suddenly grabbed him by the collar of his winter coat and, with a violent tug, pulled him into the mesh, Gerard's head denting the wire, a startled scream filling the tiny space that was the confessional booth. Again, again, again. Father Haldo kept putting his body into it. He was a big man and outweighed Gerard by at least 70 pounds. But he didn't want to hear of Gerard's adultery anymore. Didn't want to be the one to say, "I forgive your sins, my son, for penance. For penance, I'll kill." I killed him. He ran a calloused palm over his face, wiping at the splashes of blood that had gotten his cheeks. "Oh, Lord, what have I done? He deserved it, didn't he? Coming in here, telling me all he's been doing wrong, but what about me? What about me hating these last 4 years, not wanting to give another sermon, not wanting to stuff out one more flake of bread into someone else's mouth? Oh, God, help me." Father Haldo put his face in his hands and wept, all the while envisioning poor Gerard and the expression on the man's face each time his head crunched against the mesh and the hard oak frame surrounding it. He remembered hearing a bone crush and the popping of flesh as one of the sharp corners of the frame punctured a hole just above Gerard's left eye. The light, a small lamp in the ceiling of the confessional booth. He dared not turn it on. The orange glow would mix with the red that was no doubt all over the little mesh-covered window and in blotches on the walls surrounding it. As for Gerard's side of booth 2, Father Haldo couldn't bear to think of it, yet he was tempted to sneak a peek. He wanted to check and see exactly how much damage he had done. "Don't. No. Stay," he told himself. He folded his hands, fingers entwining together. "Don't, but..." The digital ring of a cell phone startled him out of his weighted thoughts and heavy heart. It came from the other side of the booth. From Gerard. Must be in one of his pockets. The phone rang persistently, each techno drone of its ring seeming to grow all the more louder in the quiet church. Grunting, Father Haldo stood up, straightened his robe, and opened the door to his side of booth 2, purposely avoiding looking back into it, not wanting to see the blood. His hand paused above the door handle of Gerard's side. When he opened the door, he'd see a No, don't think of it. The phone kept ringing. Why am I doing this? Why answer the phone? What's wrong with me? You want me, that's what. I just want him to be quiet. Just wanted peace. Just wanted silence. The rings never gave up, and it was a wonder Gerard didn't have voicemail. Screw it. Father Haldo opened the door and pawed at the bloody body inside. Gerard's head lolled back when he moved it so that he could get into the inner pocket of the man's parka. After much fumbling and squinting through watery vision, trying not to gag on the scent of blood, Father Haldo finally found the cell phone. He straightened himself and pulled up the thin radial antenna. Blood from the receiver wet his skin when he put it to his ear, the blood from Gerard's head having run down inside the parka, settling in his inner pocket in a syrupy pool. Father Haldo pressed the send button. Hell, he cleared his throat. Gerard's blood-soaked head lay tucked up against his chest, still on his knees, slumped forward a little. Hello? Hello? Who is this? Came a girl's soft voice. Swallowing, Father Haldo didn't know what to say. Was it Gerard's wife calling? A friend? Daisy? Trixie? Have to say something. Anything. I have a confession to make, he said. Well, thank you so much for tuning in for that little tale. Here's the story behind the story, and the story behind the story on this one is simply this. It is literally just a story. I was just doing some horror stories, and I just had an idea, and I just thought, you know what? I'm going to do something that I was kind of curious about. I wanted to approach the idea of a priest in a confessional booth, just in the sense of, I didn't want to explore it too deeply because again, we're doing a short story. But I thought to myself, these guys, they spend there's confession days in Catholic churches. I grew up Roman Catholic, so I know this. So and the priest would sit there all day long, outside of a break here and there, and would be listening to people confess things, who knows what they're confessing, right? They could be confessing something nice, relatively nice, I mean, or it could be something extra horrible, and do the vow of confession and all that stuff that's involved in that. The priest can't say anything. I don't know the rules behind the rules, but obviously I'm sure if someone confessed to murder, the priest is obligated to report it. But outside of it, things like that, but other items, personal items, dark items of the heart and that sort of stuff, I couldn't help but wonder, listening to that stuff day in, day out, it goes over the old principle of what you put into your body comes out of your body, right? So I'm thinking if a priest is sitting there all the time, listening to all these horrible things, I think you would get to at some point. I think at some point your brain, just on its own, would just go, you know what, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't stop thinking about, so-and-so's sin of X, or so-and-so's sin of that, or whatever, or a sharp phrase that he heard during a confession that was dark and horrible, or something, right? And the point is, I think eventually you just get worn down. Your body gets physically worn down throughout the day, right? Because we're physically doing things, and that's what nighttime is about, body repair. And I think eventually too, your mind would just get worn down to the point of, not only are you invested in these other people's lives because of these confessions, you also have your own life on top of that with its own issues, because nobody's life is perfect. So it's yeah, I think you'd break. So this was a story basically about a priest who simply broke. And I didn't want to, on purpose, if I recall correctly, I didn't want to explicitly show the carnage. I wanted to make it sort of call it a subtle carnage, sort of a subtle piece of violence, to make it just because he's a priest too, right? So I wanted to put him in a place where, one, he would kind of act like a priest in terms of physically lashing out, and because priests are very, very self-disciplined people. We could have arguments over some of the conflicts in the church and that sort of stuff, but the point is, what I'm saying, just as a general practice, they're self-disciplined, and yeah, for one to finally go off the rails, I think there would still be some restraint if they were to lash out, and then two, I think for the case of the story, because they didn't show him really going after Gerard, really doing the hardcore damage, I think he would get lost in a sort of state of violent blackout, where you're doing all this stuff, but you're not aware that you're doing it. And so that's kind of what happened here to Father Heldo. He was doing these violent things, but he couldn't quite recall, did I actually do this? And there's a mystery there, and I like that kind of stuff. I like the idea of psychological horror, psychological thriller, the concept of a person losing control of their actions and not being aware that they've lost control. That's the scary part. It's one thing to, we've all lost our temper at some point, to the point of being very rageful, and it's almost like we stand outside ourselves and watch ourselves go nuts, right? And imagine being in a position where you're going nuts and you don't realize you're going nuts. You don't see yourself going nuts, and that's scary, because people by nature, right, we want control. That's how we are. That's just the way it is. And so to have zero control, and to be aware that when you're under the zero control mode that you're a violent person, I think that would be a problem. So anyway, in the end, I also wanted to end the story sort of on a quote-unquote cliffhanger / open-ender / sum up at the same time. And so by Father Heldo simply saying, I have a confession to make, it lets the reader know simply, obviously something bad went down, and now it leaves stuff to the reader's imagination of the more explicit things that maybe Father Heldo did to Gerard. So that's the long-winded story behind the story, but again, at the same time, there's more to the story than, even though it was brief, there's more to it than what was originally perceived. So go listen to it again, and maybe you'll pick up on something new. But anyway, it's time to wrap her up. We'll see you after the credits. All right, post-credit scene time. Yeah, we're pulling an MCU again. All right. Actually, no, if we did an MCU, we'd actually have a break in the credits and then another break with more stuff after the credits. But anyway, so I'm a dad, and when my kids were little, for a while they were big into that whole would you rather game, right? And the would you rathers is always fun to play. And so let's play would you rather. And you're going to put your answers in the comments. I'll give you my answers now. Okay, so we're going to do two just to keep it simple because, again, we're doing post-credits. So first one, would you rather eat a fuzzy, juicy tarantula or a big, fat worm? We're talking those like green, was it ganger worms? You know, those big suckers that you find on leaves, and they look almost like a pickle, but a light green. Yeah. So would you rather eat the furry tarantula or the green big caterpillar thingy? And I would go with the caterpillar thingy. And I'm talking, you have to eat these things live. So, like, yeah, and the reason for that is simply because I could take it. I know the texture would be horrible, but I could do like just a couple chews, swallow, done. You put in a tarantula in your mouth, and it's alive, right? Because it's part of the whole process. And yeah, you have the potential of it crawling around a little bit while you're mashing down on it. You have the potential of it making noises. Of course, you have the potential of it secreting something that could be extra terrible for you. So I think the wise choice would be the green thing, as horrible as that is. But regardless, yeah, I think that's what I would do for that. Okay, the next would you rather. All right, would you rather be walking in the dark and stub your toe good on the corner of the coffee table, or would you rather have someone drop a very heavy cement block on your toes from approximately 3 or 4 feet up? You know what? As much as we all hate it, I'm going to side with stubbing my toe. And the reason for that is, one, the chances of me breaking my toe on the coffee table are much, much, much less than having something heavy smash down on it, just simply from the power of gravity. You know, if you have a 20 to 30 pound cement block, it's probably going to do some damage if it lands on your toe just right. So I think I'm going to stick with, as much as you're going to do the after you nail your toe on the coffee table, that's the one I'm going to go for. All right, so you choose. Big heavy thing dropped on your foot, big cement block, or stubbing your toe real good on the coffee table. All right, thanks for tuning in. See you next week for a new episode of the Realm of Heroes and Monsters Storytime with me, AP Fuchs. Cheers.